Welcome to the Geek HomeWorld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek HomeWorld. Heroes Reborn has premiered, and I have one thing to say about that. Yes, that was Hiro Nakamura from the original Season 1 of Heroes. And we are talking here about Heroes Reborn, a 13-part miniseries on NBC. And basically, think of X-Men for TV. That's kind of what Heroes and Heroes Reborn is and was, or was and is, however you want to look at it. But basically, where we pick up here on Heroes Reborn, it's a new cast of characters. They're called Evos now, basically superpowered people, most of them teenagers or around that age. And the story still centers around Noah Bennett, who is Clara Bennett, who is the kind of indestructible girl who was the cheerleader in the original Heroes TV show. And they've been kind of estranged, and it begins with a very, very big opening. And by the way, I'm calling spoiler alert on this segment. Obviously, if you haven't seen Heroes Reborn, the first episode, the first 2-hour premiere, then, turn this off, come back to it after you've watched it, and certainly tell us what you think. But anyhow, so we're looking at the show produced by Tim Kring, the executive producer and creator of the show, and he brought it back, and he's basically taking Heroes Reborn, and it's just going to pick up just about the end of Season 1 of the original Heroes storyline. So we have Noah Bennett, as I was saying, he's in Odessa, Texas, and there's this nice peace rally between humans and Evos. And everybody's getting along fine and dandy, and then all of a sudden there's this catastrophic explosion of some sort, and it's like this big darkness comes over the land, and then there's this big explosion of some sort, very apocalyptic. And so then the show flashes forward and backwards in different time shifts, and we basically see that these Evos have kind of gone underground, and they're basically on the run. Sounds kind of like mutants in X-Men, very similar. And you have a couple of vigilantes. You have Luke and Joanne, who are out there trying to avenge this tragic loss that they've had. And you've got Noah Bennett. He's not really in the company anymore or anything. His mind is essentially, his memory has been wiped. And you discover that through the 2-hour premiere there, I believe by the Haitian, if I'm correct, and who he ends up shooting. And then he's like, why did you do that? And he's like, you told me to. He's like, what? And there's so many twists and turns. Anyway, Noah Bennett comes across this guy named Quentin Frady, who is basically this conspiracy theorist guy. And he's like, I've got all this proof here that, and all these Evos are showing up. They're on the internet. They're everywhere. And people and resistance there is still, even though people are getting along, they're still not really getting along at this point because of that explosion in Odessa. Now everybody is just freaking out and they don't trust them, and it's something equivalent to mutant registration. Anyway, we find eventually Noah realizes through the 2-hour episode there that he was basically one of the people that was tracking down the different Evos, and they didn't call them Evos back then, but one of them was his daughter. And you have some different people in here. You have the character of Tommy. He's a young teenage boy, awkward as can be, trying to get with this girl. And she has a boyfriend, and the boyfriend sees him looking at her funny, and, and he's like, no, I didn't. And then he's going to beat him up. And the girl is actually the character of Emily. And Tommy's trying to get with Emily there. And Emily is trying to get him a job at the ice cream shop or whatever. And then there somewhere, and he shows her she sees before that, I'm getting ahead of myself because Luke and Joanne are going after them, and Tommy teleports them away, and wherever he's thinking is where he sends them, and he sends them to this room that's really in the factory, the cover-up factory where they're tracking all these Evos, where that was decimated, but it's below ground and all that. Very X-File-ish in a way. Anyway, so we're talking about Tommy and Emily. So Emily's boyfriend, instead of he witnesses him with the power of teleporting something, so then he says, okay, I'm gonna do you a solid here, I'm not gonna beat you up if you'll do me a favor. And Tommy's like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, and he shows him these bruises, takes him to his house, and he says, my stepfather just sits there on the couch and he beats on me, and he shows him all these bruises, and he said, I want you to just go sit in there and I'll be back. And he said, well, the time I get back, I want him gone. And he means literally gone, teleport him somewhere out of here, anywhere. So Tommy goes there and he's sitting next to the bad stepfather, and he goes to almost touch his hand. He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, and then Tommy just runs out of there. So he never gets to teleport him. But then later on, you see Emily's boyfriend come to him and like, man, thank you. You got rid of him. Thank you so much. And he's like, well, I didn't do anything. And so that's one of the other mysteries there. And you've got this really creepy guy that keeps following everybody around. He's watching everybody, and he has a penny, and he goes around and spends the penny in this interrogation room, and it kind of makes you forget who you are. And they haven't really disclosed who he is yet. It's so many different plot lines. This is like a Game of Thrones kind of show. If you blink, you've missed, basically a lot of stuff. It's just it's a different take, this show in general, on things, but I really like it because it really reminds me of the original Heroes. It's in the same spirit of it. Now, you have one of the most interesting characters is Miko. And she basically, there's this guy that comes to her apartment in Tokyo. He gets to a certain level in the game, and it says, he comes to her door and says, I was given this address, and I got to a certain level in the game, and you're a katana girl in the game. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he gives her the comic book and says, look, read this. And then he leaves her alone for a little bit, and she reads the comic book. So she looks on the floorboard, and just like in the game, she finds this katana sword, and then she becomes this great warrior. And in the game, just like in her reality, she goes into the video game and she's looking for her father who's being held captive. And so there's some great special effects in this. They're actually in the video game, and then this guy comes back to her apartment, sees her computer on with the game running, and then he starts playing the game and gets to a different level, and he's able to enter the game as his character. And then they showing you them both fighting, and he's like, where are you going? And Miko says, I'm going to save my father, I have to. And then it's real interesting. And then she comes out of the game at another point, and then she's surrounded by all these guys, but she can't in the real world use that. She doesn't really have, well, she does have the sword, but she didn't take it out the sheath. She's just using it and just beating the heck out of all these guys that are trying to detain her. Then you have this former soldier named Carlos, and basically he takes on, or he's going to take on, the role that his brother had, who's a vigilante who actually had some kind of fighting powers. And his brother was set up. This girl was in an alleyway, and he thought he was saving her life, so he kind of jumps off this building on top of a car, gets down there, and it has some really cool fight scenes, very, very superhero-like. And he's got this whole costume on, and he's got a kind of underground following, via the internet and all, and he's sticking up for Evos so that they won't be picked on, and he's encouraging to stand up for their rights, etc., etc. So anyway, he's beats up all these dudes, and then the lady goes ahead and shoots him that he was trying to save, and so then he has a knife that like comes up from, kind of like, it reminds me of Assassin's Creed in a way, which is pretty cool. And he just like flings a knife at her and goes right in her throat, and then basically, and she's gone. And then he gets away before the cops get there, and he goes back to the garage where his brother Carlos is begrudgingly working with him in the business there at the garage. And I guess he has a younger nephew or younger brother or something, and he's all upset about it. That he's actually idolizing this, not knowing that who that vigilante is and all that. So anyhow, Carlos basically discovers this lair underneath in the bottom of the garage there, and so And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're an Evo. I didn't know." Blah blah blah, and all this. And then the guy who's the real hero or the real Evo dies from the gunshot when he's trying to repair it, and he ends up dying, which is crazy. And so Carlos is now struggling with picking up the mask and becoming that hero, and that's, I think, what's going to happen. Then you have the character, her name is Erica, and she's this big tech conglomerate. She's the head of that, and so I'm sure there's going to be something nefarious going on there. And you basically have, and this is interesting, I'm looking at this online, James Middleton is also joining Kring and producing this, and he did Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And you also have Peter Elkoff, who did Sons of Anarchy, which I was not aware of. So that's very interesting that they're all three. Those are all three Kring doing the original Heroes and doing this, being the creator and executive producer, to bring on James Middleton from Sarah Connor Chronicles and Peter from Sons of Anarchy. It's going to be a good series. I like it. It's in the spirit of everything that's going on. So we're looking for a lot of things from Tim Kring's Heroes Reborn. Wanted to give a shout out here to one of our followers here at Geek HomeWorld, because we had a lot of feedback on the show. I was doing some tweeting during the premiere, and she is Allison at Digital Nicotine. She said, "I enjoyed it. I didn't go in expecting it to be the same as its predecessor." And that's a very good point right there, because I was trying to not compare this to Heroes, but I did want it to be like Heroes. But, we are going to see Hiro Nakamura. We're going to see more of Matt Parkman, who is, remember, he was the telepathic cop. Mohinder Suresh we're going to see again. And we saw the Haitian. And there'll be others that are going to pop in the series here and there. So I'm looking forward to more of Heroes Reborn. So if you'd like your tweet featured or whatever, hit us up on @GeekHomeWorld on Twitter and let us know what you're thinking about Heroes Reborn. And check it out Thursdays on NBC.
Geek HomeWorld Countdown. 10, 9, 8.
Less than 3 months until the premiere of Star Wars The Force Awakens. The latest Star Wars rumors center around Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader in episodes 2 and 3 of Star Wars. And the rumor is that Hayden Christensen may appear in Star Wars Episode VIII and also in Star Wars Rouge One. Now, Rouge One basically is based upon the Rebel Resistance, and we could see Hayden Christensen as full-on Vader in that, or we could see him in either movie, probably in Episode 8, in a flashback of some sorts. But some kind of combination of either a flashback or full-on Vader costume. Now, there has been talk that insiders have seen a full workable costume with the helmet and everything, with the chest plate and everything totally functional, that's being made for Rouge One. So, looks like possibly, from the rumor, Episode 8, we may get a flashback of Anakin, Hayden Christensen portraying Anakin, and then in Rouge One, we may get a full-on Darth Vader. So that's kind of interesting, because my understanding, and these things are subject to change, and everything is super top secret, obviously, but Rouge One is going to be probably in the past. So it's interesting to look at how that's going to be. Now, filming has officially begun in Ireland for Star Wars Episode VIII, and so far it is confirmed that Episode 8 will feature Mark Hamill reprising his role as Luke Skywalker. So that leads to a lot of possibilities, and the more Hamill we get, the better. It's just going to be awesome. Now, in case you're wondering what the timeline is looking like for Star Wars movies, we're looking at, obviously, Episode 7, which is The Force Awakens. It's coming out this December 18th in 2015. It's going to premiere in theaters. Super psyched, super excited about this one. I'm trying not to get my hopes up like Phantom Menace did and when that came out, and then the disappointment after that. But I'm really excited to see what J.J. Abrams is going to do with The Force Awakens, and so far from the 2 trailers I've seen, it looks very interesting. Another thing that did leak out on the internet is that J.J. Abrams confirmed, to our chagrin, I guess, that there will be a little bit of lens flare, which we know from the first Star Trek that he did, Star Trek, too much lens flare, and then he really toned it down for Star Trek Into Darkness. Now we're looking at J.J. Abrams bringing a little bit of lens flare into Star Wars Episode VIII or The Force Awakens. I hope it does not distract from the movie. I'm not a fan of the lens flare. And anyway, so we're looking at Episode 7 coming out this December. Then we have, in between the main movies of 7, 8, and 9, you have 2 separate movies, and one of them comes out in 2016, which is Star Wars Rouge One, and it's going to star Felicity Jones, and the rumor is that she's possibly Boba Fett's daughter, and Diego Luna is also starring in Rouge One, so among others. But it's early on, and there'll be more to come on Rouge One when we get closer to that. Now, you're looking at Star Wars Episode VIII that Hayden Christensen may also appear in. That's coming out May 26th of 2017. Rouge One, by the way, is December 16th of 2016. So we're going to get Rouge One, then Episode VIII. Then we get another standalone Star Wars film. It had early on been rumored to be one of 3 things. Either a Yoda movie, like going back to an origin story of Yoda, maybe a Boba Fett movie, Boba Fett / Bounty Hunters, which could be very interesting, or the one I think they're actually going with, which is a young Han Solo. And so, speaking of Star Trek, I think of Chris Pine could do a good young Han Solo. But my money is actually on the big box office champion, which is Chris Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy, with Marvel there, and the big bucks that movie did. And also with the even greater bucks, the box office that he brought in with Jurassic World. And, you know, he's Star-Lord, man. So I totally think that Chris Pratt might be a perfect choice for a young Han Solo. So that will be interesting to see if it all pans out that well. But if it is the standalone film, like a Han Solo film, then that would be awesome. The other rumor is there could be a young Obi-Wan movie, and that could be interesting in itself. So, you know, I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm going to take what they give me, and as long as it makes sense in the continuity and the canon of Star Wars, and it's believable and it's good, a good script, I'm going to be on board with it. So we're looking at 2018 for that second standalone Star Wars movie, and then we're looking at Star Wars Episode 9 coming out in 2019. So 9 and 19, okay? So that's our little bit here on Star Wars, and let us know what you think. Are you excited about Hayden Christensen possibly being in Episode 8 and in Rouge One? I am. I'll tell you straight out. Yes, he's not the best of actors, but, you know, the script he had to work with wasn't so great, but I would love to see Hayden Christensen reprise this role. It would make sense. Now, you know, when we looked at the original Star Wars trilogy and then we looked at the remastered different version, you had the older gentleman who was Darth Vader when he came back in the spirit, right? With Yoda and Obi-Wan. But then when George Lucas redid it, of course, you had the ghost of Hayden Christensen, which I guess now when you think of it all together, it probably does make sense having Hayden Christensen in there, because he was Anakin before he turned to the dark side. So I don't know. I don't think that he did learn the path to immortality, but after he was saved and Return of the Jedi by Luke and basically brought back to the side of light right before his death as Darth Vader, And he said, tell your sister you were right. Tell her you were right. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go with this and what happens with the Hayden Christensen component of that. So let us know what you think at Geek HomeWorld. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek HomeWorld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek HomeWorld podcast.
Geek HomeWorld.